It was an ordinary morning, but the energy at the airport was anything but dull. Travelers rushed through the terminal, dragging their luggage, grabbing coffee, and exchanging hurried goodbyes with loved ones. Inside the plane, a steady stream of passengers began filing in, their faces reflecting varying degrees of excitement, fatigue, and indifference. Among them was a man in his early 40s, casually dressed in a crisp, light shirt and dark trousers. His face held a calm, serious expression, but his presence was unassuming, blending seamlessly with the bustling crowd. As the plane filled up, people stowed their bags in the overhead compartments, adjusted their belongings, and settled into their seats. The cabin buzzed with soft conversations, the rustle of newspapers, and the occasional squeals of excited children. At the aisle, a flight attendant named Rachel navigated the space with practiced ease. Her graceful movements and warm demeanor were the hallmark of her nearly decade-long career. Rachel, in her early 30s, was one of those flight attendants who made their job look effortless. With her sharp uniform and polished smile, she had an air of confidence that came from years of experience. Passengers often remembered her for her impeccable service and her ability to remain composed, no matter the situation. To her colleagues, she was a favorite, a reliable professional who carried herself with both charm and authority. Yet today, unknown to her, Rachel's polished demeanor would be tested in a way she had never experienced before. The man in seat 14C, reserved and quiet, caught Rachel's attention as she moved down the aisle for the initial beverage service. There was something about him, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" she asked with her signature polite tone, offering a slight smile. The man glanced up briefly, his expression calm but unreadable. "Water, please," he said, his voice steady, carrying an air of quiet authority that didn't quite match his otherwise ordinary appearance. Rachel handed him the bottle with practiced efficiency and moved on, giving him no more thought than she would any other passenger. Yet, as she continued down the aisle, a faint sense of curiosity lingered in the back of her mind. Something about his demeanor, the quiet confidence he exuded, seemed different, though she couldn't pinpoint why. To her, he seemed like any other business traveler, reserved, straightforward, and focused. But Rachel had learned over the years that first impressions could be deceiving. As the flight progressed, Rachel overheard snippets of a hushed conversation near the galley. Her colleague James, a fellow flight attendant with a knack for gossip, was speaking in a low, conspiratorial tone. "That guy in 14C, he whispered to another crew member. "Doesn't he look familiar to you? I swear I've seen him before." Rachel rolled her eyes, dismissing James's speculation. Passengers often reminded people of celebrities or public figures, and it was a common source of in-flight chatter. Yet, as Rachel passed 14C again during her rounds, she couldn't help but feel a faint ripple of recognition herself. The man sat quietly, his gaze fixed out the window, completely unfazed by the curiosity he was stirring. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, Rachel had nearly forgotten about the man. But the calm routine of the flight was interrupted when the captain called her to the cockpit. "We've had a request from a passenger to speak with you directly," he said, his tone indicating that this was unusual. Rachel frowned, trying to recall if she had missed addressing any significant concerns. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. The captain glanced at his notes. "A Mr. Logan Kent." The name rang a distant bell, but Rachel couldn't quite place it. She nodded and made her way back to the cabin, her steps measured as she adjusted her composure. Approaching 14C, she noticed the man observing her calmly, his expression unreadable yet strangely disarming. "Mr. Kent," she began, her voice steady despite her unease. "I understand you've asked to speak with me?" Logan Kent gave a small nod, gesturing for her to take the seat across from him. "Yes, thank you for coming over," he said, his tone polite but firm. "I wanted to bring something to your attention." Rachel's curiosity piqued as she sat down, maintaining her professional demeanor. There was an air of mystery around the man, and she couldn't help but wonder what this unexpected conversation would entail. Rachel settled into the seat across from Logan Kent, her professionalism intact, but her mind racing with questions. There was something about his calm and confident demeanor that demanded attention. His piercing gaze, though not unkind, carried an air of authority that unsettled her. "Thank you for taking the time to speak with me," Logan began, sliding a sleek black business card across the small tray table toward her. The motion was deliberate, almost symbolic, and Rachel felt a strange sense of anticipation as she picked up the card. The moment her eyes landed on the embossed gold lettering, her breath hitched. Logan Kent, it read, followed by his title, CEO of Skyline Airways. The realization hit her like turbulence on a clear day. This was no ordinary passenger. This was the man at the very top of the airline she worked for, the one whose decisions shaped her entire career. Rachel's cheeks flushed as memories of her earlier indifference flashed in her mind. She had treated him like any other traveler, making snap judgments based on his unassuming appearance and quiet demeanor. Now, sitting face to face with the most powerful figure in her professional world, she felt a wave of regret wash over her. Mr. Kent, I didn't realize," she stammered, her usual composure slipping for the first time in years. Logan held up a hand, his expression calm but firm. "It's fine," he said, his tone measured. "I'm not here to reprimand you. I just wanted to share some feedback." Rachel nodded, swallowing hard. "Of course, sir. I'm listening." Logan leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "Your service has been professional, Rachel," he began, his voice carrying a weight that made her hang onto every word. "But I couldn't help noticing a moment of hesitation earlier. It made me think about how assumptions, however small, can shape our interactions." Rachel's heart sank. His words were polite, but their implication was clear. She had misjudged him, and he had noticed. The gravity of the moment wasn't lost on her. She had spent years perfecting her craft, priding herself on treating every passenger with the same level of respect and care. Yet here she was, confronted with her own blind spots in the most humbling way possible. "You're absolutely right," she said finally, her voice quieter now but resolute. "And I sincerely apologize if, at any moment, I failed to treat you with the respect you deserve." Logan's expression softened slightly, though his gaze remained firm. "We all carry biases, Rachel, whether we're aware of them or not," he said. "The key is recognizing them and working to overcome them." His words hung in the air, heavier than she expected. For a moment, Rachel felt exposed, not as a flight attendant, but as a person. She nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Kent. I'll reflect on this and do better moving forward." Logan gave a faint nod, the corners of his mouth lifting into the barest hint of a smile. "That's all I can ask for," he said. As Rachel returned to her duties, Logan's words echoed in her mind. She couldn't help but replay the entire interaction, scrutinizing every detail. How often had she made assumptions about passengers? How many times had she overlooked someone's worth because of a fleeting judgment? The questions gnawed at her, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself. In the galley, James noticed her contemplative expression. "You okay?" he asked, handing her a tray of drinks. Rachel forced a small smile. "Yeah, just thinking." James raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Rachel appreciated his silence. She needed the space to process what had just happened. As she moved through the cabin, her perspective began to shift. Each passenger she interacted with felt different now. Not just faces in a crowd, but individuals with their own stories, complexities, and significance. Midway through the flight, as Rachel passed Logan's seat, she noticed him reading a document on his tablet, completely engrossed. He looked calm, even approachable, and she found herself wondering what kind of challenges he faced in his position. What kind of person was he beyond the title of CEO? The thought lingered as she continued her rounds, her usual routine now imbued with a newfound sense of purpose. By the time the plane began its descent, Rachel felt a mix of emotions: embarrassment, gratitude, and determination. She had been given a rare opportunity to confront her own shortcomings, and she wasn't going to let it go to waste. As passengers began to prepare for landing, Rachel made a quiet promise to herself. From this day forward, she would see people, not just their appearances or behaviors, but who they truly were. As the plane touched down and the familiar sound of the seatbelt sign turning off echoed through the cabin, passengers began preparing to disembark. Rachel moved through the aisles, assisting where needed, her mind still replaying her interaction with Logan Kint. The weight of the lesson he had imparted lingered with her, a quiet but powerful reminder of her responsibility, not just as a flight attendant, but as someone who worked with people every day. Passengers streamed toward the exit, some eager to reach their destination, others moving at a more relaxed pace. Rachel's eyes scanned the crowd, instinctively seeking out Logan. She spotted him near the front, his demeanor unchanged, calm, composed, and focused. Despite her earlier nerves, Rachel felt compelled to speak with him one last time. "Mr. Kint," she called softly as he neared the jetway. Logan turned, pausing to face her. His expression was neutral but attentive, as though he had been expecting her. Rachel took a deep breath, summoning the courage to express what she had been reflecting on for the past few hours. "I just wanted to thank you again for what you said earlier," she began, her voice steady but earnest. "It wasn't easy to hear, but it was important. You've given me a lot to think about, and I want you to know that I'll carry this lesson forward." Logan regarded her for a moment, his expression softening into a faint smile. "That's all I can hope for," he said simply. "Growth starts with awareness, Rachel. You've taken the first step." She nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you, sir. Have a good day." Logan gave her a polite nod before disappearing down the jetway, his presence leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than usual. Rachel stood there for a moment, letting the hum of the emptying cabin surround her. It felt like the end of a conversation, but the beginning of something much larger. An internal shift she couldn't yet fully articulate. The next few minutes passed in a blur as Rachel and the crew prepared the plane for its next flight. Yet, her mind remained focused, not on the day's tasks, but on its lessons. She thought about the countless passengers she had served over the years and how many of them she might have misjudged, their stories left unexplored because of assumptions she hadn't even realized she was making. Later, as she stood in the quiet galley during a brief pause in her duties, Rachel reflected on her role. It wasn't just about delivering drinks or ensuring safety protocols were followed. It was about connecting with people, really seeing them for who they were, beyond appearances, beyond titles. From that day forward, Rachel approached her work with renewed intention. Every interaction became an opportunity to listen, to learn, and to offer genuine care. Each passenger was no longer just a seat number or a drink request, but a person with a unique story, deserving of respect and understanding. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Her colleagues observed a subtle but significant shift in her demeanor. Her smiles felt warmer, her conversations more engaging, her presence more attentive. Passengers, too, seemed to respond differently, often leaving the flight with kind words about their experience. One day, months later, Rachel found herself on another flight, interacting with a passenger who, at first glance, seemed entirely ordinary. But this time, she didn't stop at first impressions. She asked questions, listened carefully, and treated them as though they were the most important person on the plane. As the flight ended and the passenger thanked her with a heartfelt smile, Rachel felt a quiet satisfaction. She knew now that her job was about more than just efficiency or professionalism. It was about making people feel seen, valued, and respected, even if only for the duration of a flight. Rachel never saw Logan Kint again, but his words stayed with her. They became a guiding principle, a quiet voice in the back of her mind that reminded her to pause, to reflect, and to choose kindness over assumption. Years later, as Rachel looked back on her career, she realized that moment with Logan had been a turning point, not just in her work, but in her life. It was a reminder that everyone, no matter how unassuming they may seem, carries their own weight, their own significance. And it was her job, her privilege, to honor that. As Rachel finished her shift that day, the hum of the airport filling the air around her, she smiled to herself. It had been an ordinary morning when the lesson began, but it had shaped her into someone extraordinary, someone who saw beyond the surface, who treated every passenger as more than just a traveler. It was a lesson she vowed never to forget.